Thank you very much, Frederick. I feel extremely honored to be able to share kind of our thoughts and views with the audience at the OECD. Let me start by, I think this is how we came to our draft guidelines, and it all started, I think, with our mission as a multifunctional authority. Our mission is making markets work well for people and businesses now and in the future. And in order to make markets work well, we strongly believe that in order to transition markets to more sustainable markets, to more carbon-free markets, it's not only the responsibility of the government, but it's also a responsibility of businesses and consumers. We can only change our economy by working together. And it was with this in mind that we, in July of this year, we published our new draft guidelines on sustainability. And these new draft guidelines had twofold. The reasons were twofold. I mean, first of all, it was also an exercise for ourselves to see how we could look again at our own rules, which are based on European competition law, and see where there is more room for sustainability agreements than previously thought. And second, the Netherlands is a relatively small economy. We're a small jurisdiction and a very open economy. So we do not have the illusion that by changing the policies in the Netherlands, we will combat this global climate crisis. So the second reason why we published our draft guidelines was to accelerate and foster an international debate on the role of competition policy and sustainability. From a very practical point of view, because many speakers here and other speakers who are not here have a fantastic academic background or are lawyers working in private practice. But I think from the competition authorities were rather quiet in the debate. And we also hope with our guidelines to show competition authorities what is possible under the competition laws. So our draft guidelines have, I think, three important elements. The first element, which is more than half of the guidelines, I will almost say 75% of the guidelines, consists of what I would call rather straightforward bread and butter application of competition law to sustainability agreements. If you're a competition specialist, nothing really new and shocking. But what we did is, following basically on Johnny's comment, what we provided was lots of examples in plain words, understandable for non-competition specialists. What can be done? What types of agreements companies can enter into without restricting competition? So this was a more of kind of an inspirational piece, if I may say so. And for those of you who are interested, the draft sustainability guidelines are published in English on our website. So for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to look at them, please check our website. The second element of our draft guidelines was what I would call kind of our enforcement policy. And we looked at our previous enforcement policy in general terms, which was in line with what many other competition authorities do, based on self-assessment, responsibility on the parties to an agreement to self-assess and see if they fulfill the criteria of our competition laws. And what we said for sustainability agreements that we would kind of open the doors, and we explicitly said in our guidelines that our staff would be willing to meet with companies that are contemplating, thinking, or already in execution phase of sustainability agreements to give guidance on the application of the law. And the second element, what we did is we kind of granted immunity or committed not to impose fines on companies that enter into bona fide agreements that follow kind of the structure of our guidelines, the self-assessment part of our guidelines, and that are made public, so that companies can enter into agreements and make this public, even without consulting us. And if in the end it turns out that there are anti-competitive effects that force us to intervene into the agreements, we said we will not impose fines, but we do expect you to amend the agreement accordingly, hoping that this would remove the threat of fines and, in some cases, personal liability by companies. And that there is a possibility, so that there's this, we limit the risk of over deterrence. And the third element of our guidelines, which attracted the most attention, was our new approach to what I would call a subset of sustainability agreements, namely environmental damage agreements. And we defined this subset of environmental damage agreements as agreements that do restrict competition, but where there is a clear market failure as a result of the negative externalities. In a way, we looked at these environmental damage agreements as a commons problem, as a problem with where these agreements intend to limit the use of commons, of shared resources, and when we say, in the traditional view of the commons as the meadows outside the fields, we look at their environment as a commons as well. It's our air, it's our environment that's being polluted, and therefore common action is necessary to save these commons for future generation. So for this subset of sustainability agreements, the environmental damage agreements, we propose to balance the negative effects of a restriction of competition, most often a price increase, against the benefits for society as a whole, both for short-term benefits and for long-term benefits. And this is what we believe, and this has also been advocated by Simon and by Maurits and by many others. This is completely in line with the law and with the EU treaty. So we are not in a position to change the law, but we believe that this is the right interpretation of European competition law for this specific subset of agreements. So when we put out our draft guidelines for consultation in July, over the months and the following months, we received many positive reactions. Of course, with a few notable exemptions. There were a few people who said that we were out of their mind and that we should stick to a strict interpretation and exclude out-of-market efficiencies, so benefits for society as a whole could not be taken into account. And there was also some criticism basically on the other side, saying, yeah, what you restrict this new approach, taking into account the benefits for society as a whole, to environmental damage agreements, but the subset should be much wider. There should be more agreements that could benefit from this exception to the rule. I think where we are now is we've digested all the comments, and early January we will publish a second draft of the guidelines, taking into account all the comments that we've received so far, to fulfill the goal that we try to achieve with our initial guidelines, to foster the debate. So early January, we will release a new draft where we will more clearly and more elaborately explain the definition of the subset of agreements, the environmental damage agreements. We also give, because that was also a comment that we received, we will give more guidance on how to quantify the benefits to society. And this will be followed by an initiative that maybe Johannes will address as well, that we will jointly with the Greek authority, we commissioned an academic economic study to provide further details on methods to quantify benefits, environmental benefits that can be used by the authorities. One last point, and to round this off. As I said, the Netherlands is far too small to make a significant impact on the global drive to a more sustainable economy. And it's all too small to stimulate the responsibility of the business community and of consumers to become an important driver of that change. And I do hope that the authorities, ministries, public authorities, but also international communities like the OECD, that we can work together, that more authorities and more companies will step on this change, because we believe that we need to take action now. Jointly, we can only do this together.